So the algae inside of my 55 white spector crayfish breeding tank is going insane. I need to get something to control it. So I'm planning on getting some frog bit to try and suck up excess nutrients, because every day I come down here and I scrape the heck out of this glass and holy sweet mother of mercy, it's just full again. Oh, and I can't really put a pleco in here because crayfish are crayfish. And you can't really do snails either in this case. Some people will argue Malaysian trumpet snails, but for the love of God, I don't want those. Anything but those. So, plants. I'm going to do plants. So, I'm just having a hard time finding frogbit. It's a floating plant, breeds quick. I could use it in many of my tanks. I'll get it eventually. But, update. So, we got a bunch of white specter crayfish buddies, and as I said, the algae is kind of crazy right now. Some of them are missing appendages, but are very much alive. Some of them are definitely not as big as the other ones that I've sold are. But the biggest update is Casper is a naughty, naughty little girl. Now, you can see all the stuff that builds up on her shell. She, in particular, seems to have this problem where just stuff builds up on her exoskeleton. She'll shed it, and then she'll be the only one with a ton of this buildup on her shell again. But that's not a problem. It doesn't affect her negatively. What is very interesting is the fact that she is buried again. Now, let's see if I can get a good angle. There's the eggs. Woohoo! Casper's gonna be a mommy again. Now, when I got Casper, I just got her by herself to start my colony here. Casper was buried when I bought her. She had her babies, and that's what you see all here. And she's a dirty little girl because that could have only happened from some of her offspring, so crayfish. Yeah. Anywho, so yeah, looks like I'll be having more crayfish babies again, but I still have all these crayfish. The thing is, I do sell them, and I only sell them at a quantity of about 6 at a time to various places, and they don't really sell super quick because crayfish require a very specific audience who are willing to take on the task of a territorial and aggressive kind of invertebrate. So they're not for everyone, and they definitely make it harder to sell because you have to find that niche audience that wants them. They are fantastic little pals, though. Fact of the matter is, I've got Mexican dwarf crayfish in the other tank, and they annihilate each other. They're supposed to be peaceful, but I disagree entirely. I think the females killed all the males, and I have not had any success breeding them whatsoever. And yet, Casper is buried again. I'm officially a crayfish breeder, not just some dude who had a Prager crayfish that had eggs hatch. So, this is approximately 3 months, 2-3 months down the line that these guys were old enough to breed with a female. So, I guess it takes 3 months to get to adult age from birth or from hatching to sexually mature for white specters. So, at least I know that now. The thing about it is, I was going to revamp this tank because every summer I do a wild fish tank. And the reason I wanted to do a wild fish tank is because I wanted to go back to my roots. Now, yes, I do breed a bunch of little things for profit, but how I got started in the whole aquarium thing was by trying to keep my food that I catch in the lake alive so that they can detox, make sure they're not diseased before I eat them. Because I do eat what I catch. And I know to an aquarist that might not be what they want to hear. And I understand, there's a love for fish, and eating the fish or aquatic buddies seems wrong if you're considering them as pets, but I have to make a very clear distinction about what I consider as a pet versus what I consider as food. If it comes from the wild and I catch it for the express intent of doing this, it's my food. Now, yes, I've become attached to my food at some points, which makes it hard to dispatch them, but I have to have a kind of an iron will about that, and I do. But this tank was supposed to be for the wild fish that I would catch. Now, obviously, it's not suited for a catfish or a bass of full size. It would be overstocking this 55. I know that, but the intent is not to keep them in there forever. It's just to make sure they detoxify and get healthy enough, and that I can feed them special foods to flavor up the meat, because when you have wild food or wild fish and you eat them, they taste what's called gamey. And basically their flesh will taste like whatever they eat, which is from the environment. And most of these things like catfish are bottom feeders, which means the quality of food they get is pretty gnarly, and that means their taste is kind of ugh. So you flavor them up beforehand, make sure you're not eating a diseased fish, etc. And that's how you eat somewhat sustainably. Obviously, you got to get your fishing license, and you got to, follow the rules from the DNR and all that. But that's what this tank is supposed to be. That's why I got that filter, and we filled it up to brim. That is nothing but biomedia. That is just filled to the brim with biomedia to be able to handle the bio load of a fish that is going to be overstocked for this tank for a few days. And if I keep breeding white spector crayfish, I can't use this tank for that, which is kind of a bummer. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do. Now, there is another option for what my plan is for that, and that involves my 40 breeder. This may actually be a better tank than the 55 for keeping a wild fish, and here's why. The 40 breeder is not as tall, it's not as long, but it is much deeper. So that way the fish can turn around and at least swim a little bit versus being stuck going one direction and then flopping and flailing about trying to get in another direction. So what I might do, because of the massive bio load, I'd probably switch the canister filters out. That's a Cascade 1000, that's the Cascade 1500. I put the 1500 for the 40 gallon to handle the excessive bio load from a catfish. But that means I would also have to rehome the leftover species in this tank. That's okay though, because there's only two things in this 40 breeder. And that's Peaches, my friendly little pleco. Shy little guy, but he's such a good fish. I love little Peaches. And then there's Vladimir, my vampire shrimp. Those really are the only two inhabitants that I purposely keep in here at the moment. Now this tank would have to be revamped and redone a little bit. I'd have to change out the type of water that goes in here to my well water, because you got to remember the water from the lake is a completely different situation than the water you'd get from like an RO system and remineralized. Just because it's better water doesn't mean it's not going to shock their system. So well water is much closer to what they would find in the wild in terms of the hardness, TDS, KH, GH, all that stuff, and pH. So it's fine. I'll swap the water out slowly. I'll have to rehome Vladimir in one of my shrimp tanks because I love Vlad. He's been with me for years now. I don't want anything to happen to him. He's going to go in a sanctuary tank where he can be by himself or with other shrimp. He's going to be safe. Peaches, I have some awkward feelings about putting him in here. I know Peaches would help clean up the algae, but they're crayfish. I love Peaches. I don't want Peaches to get nipped at constantly. I am truly afraid of putting Peaches in there. So I don't think that I can do that. So peaches would have to go in a different tank. And 10-gallon tanks are just not suitable for a bushy-nosed pleco. So I need to really think hard about what it is I want to do. Because I do breed for profit, and that means I don't really have much in the ways of breeding like for fun. So, dilemma, dilemma, dilemma. I'll figure something out, but that is what's going on lately. So, that's my situation. Thought I would update you guys. That tank is so nasty. I need a permanent solution to that algae, though. Anywho, thanks for watching, guys.